Throughout time, those on the front lines have not only encountered enemies of flesh and blood, but sometimes inexplicable forces that challenge our understanding of the natural world. In the heat of battle, under the cover of night, or during routine operations, soldiers have reported encounters that can only be described as bizarre, terrifying, and often unexplainable. These 10 stories explore incidents where military personnel came face to face with the unknown, phenomena that range from massive cryptids and ancient legends to objects in the sky, defying the laws of physics. These accounts offer a rare glimpse into what happens when military might meets forces beyond human comprehension. The Kandahar Giant. It was a mission unlike any other. As members of a US Special Forces team in the remote mountain ranges of Kandahar, Afghanistan, were dispatched to locate a squad that had mysteriously disappeared. The initial report painted a picture of routine but dangerous terrain navigation. However, as they neared the location where the squad was last known to be, a strange silence descended, and one of the soldiers later recounted that even the natural sounds of the wild seemed to have faded away. What happened next would forever etch this mission into the minds of those who survived and into the annals of military lore. According to several accounts from soldiers involved, the team came upon the entrance of a cave. Inside, the light was dim and visibility was low. Moving cautiously, they advanced in formation when suddenly a colossal figure emerged, standing at an estimated 12 to 15 feet tall. The creature's appearance was as shocking as its size. It was humanoid, with reddish hair, and bore 6 fingers on each hand. Reports described its skin as leathery and a strong odor permeating the air around it, likened to a stench of decay. Before the soldiers could process the sight fully, the giant attacked, brandishing a spear that impaled one of the soldiers. Chaos erupted as the team quickly regained composure and engaged the creature with concentrated gunfire. This barrage reportedly lasted around 30 seconds, using M4 carbines and .50 caliber rifles, which ultimately took down the creature after a prolonged exchange. Even in death, the sheer enormity of the body was shocking. The team contacted base, and a helicopter was deployed to airlift the body. Eyewitnesses allege that a Chinook helicopter arrived, and with substantial effort the giant's body was transported back to the base. There, the remains were loaded onto a C-130 aircraft, disappearing from sight and, ostensibly, from any official records. Soldiers involved were reportedly asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, with some stating that they were told the incident would be classified for national security purposes. Despite the NDAs, years later, members of the team came forward, driven, as one put it, by the belief that the American public deserved to know what had happened. Skeptics dismissed the Kandahar Giant story as a combination of folklore, hallucination, or even a military tactic meant to cover up an unexpected incident. Yet, for those who recount the story, the memory remains vivid. One soldier stated in an interview that he could never forget the sight of the giant or the intensity of the encounter. The story of the Kandahar Giant raises questions about what may be hidden in remote and hard-to-reach parts of the world, and what governments might be keeping from public knowledge. Whether a terrifying encounter with a humanoid giant or the product of myth, the Kandahar Giant remains one of the most astonishing and controversial military encounters reported in recent years. The Dogman Encounter. The encounter began on an unusually quiet evening in a remote part of the northern United States, where a former US Army veteran had retreated for a solitary camping trip in the dense, rugged wilderness. He had been seeking calm, a space away from the memories of combat and the noise of civilian life. But as night descended, what he encountered was beyond anything his years of military experience had prepared him to face. As he sat outside his cabin, the woods around him grew unnaturally silent. No owls called, no rustling in the underbrush, just an eerie, profound stillness. Then a sound echoed through the trees. At first, it was distant, like a branch snapping or perhaps a large animal moving in the darkness. But the noise grew louder, coming closer, and soon enough, he could make out heavy, almost rhythmic footsteps crunching on the gravel path near his cabin. He raised his flashlight, and the beam caught something partially hidden among the dense foliage. What he saw next defied logical explanation. Staring back at him from between the trees was a figure that appeared almost humanoid, but its head was unmistakably that of a large dog. The veteran described it as having short, dense black fur and a face that looked like a cross between a German Shepherd and a Labrador, but unnaturally large. The creature was not on all fours but standing upright, its powerful muscular legs supporting it as if it were built to walk bipedally. Its red, piercing eyes were locked directly onto his, giving him the unsettling sense that he was not just being observed, but assessed. Frozen in place, the veteran took in every detail. The creature's legs were unusually thick, almost resembling those of a human but far more powerful, like those of a professional heavyweight lifter. Its arms were shorter but muscular, with large claws protruding from its fingers. This wasn't merely an animal, he realized. It was something else. Something that seemed aware, calculating. The stare between them held for several moments, with the creature standing unmoving, appearing almost curious or even hostile. Finally, his training kicked in, and he slowly lifted his rifle. Just as he prepared to fire, he was distracted by the distant rumble of an approaching vehicle. The noise broke the moment, and the creature suddenly bolted. What happened next was equally astounding. As it moved, it dropped onto all fours and raced through the trees, covering an impossible distance in seconds. It moved with both animalistic agility and an unnatural speed, finally disappearing into the dense forest beyond. When the veteran's friend arrived, he relayed what he had seen. His friend was understandably skeptical, but the veteran's shaken demeanor and insistence on what he had witnessed were compelling. Later, he recounted his experience to a nearby forest ranger, hoping for answers, but was met with a cold, curt reply. "We don't talk about that stuff." This response left him more unsettled than reassured, as it suggested his experience was far from unique. In the days that followed, the veteran struggled to shake the image of the creature's red eyes and dog-like features. Each time he thought back on the encounter, he found himself wrestling with questions that had no simple answers. Was it an unknown cryptid? Or perhaps a creature that had somehow escaped the notice of modern science? Or could it have been a phenomenon of some unknown origin, something the wilderness harbored but humanity had yet to understand? UFOs at Malmstrom Air Force Base. On the night of March 16, 1967, deep in the plains of Montana, the nuclear missile silos at Malmstrom Air Force Base were on high alert. As one of America's primary missile sites during the Cold War, Malmstrom was secured with precision, its personnel highly trained, and its defenses equipped with layers of fail-safes. But that night, something happened that even the most stringent protocols couldn't prevent. A reported encounter with an unidentified flying object that seemed to wield the power to neutralize America's nuclear arsenal. In the early hours, Robert Salas, a captain stationed at the base, received a startling call from a security guard above ground. The guard was frantic, reporting bright lights hovering over the facility. At first, Salas dismissed the sighting, suspecting stress or fatigue, but within minutes the guard called again, more insistent this time, his voice betraying fear. "Sir, they're hovering right over us," he said, describing a large, glowing red object that seemed to be almost alive, pulsating above the silos. Suddenly, something far more alarming took place. As Salas and his team were processing the call, multiple missile systems went offline. In quick succession, 10 Minuteman nuclear missiles, each individually contained in hardened underground silos and separated by miles of terrain, shut down simultaneously. The probability of this occurring due to a technical fault was exceedingly low, and no known procedure or single failure could explain such a large-scale malfunction. Yet, before their eyes, the missile systems registered as no-go, meaning they were entirely unresponsive to command. The team scrambled to investigate, but they could only confirm what their instruments already told them. The missiles were, inexplicably, shut down. Outside, security personnel continued to report sightings of the mysterious, glowing object, which seemed to move silently through the air, undeterred by radar or radio interference. In the days following the incident, the Air Force initiated a detailed investigation. Technicians analyzed the site, but no faults or tampering could be identified. The missiles were gradually restored, yet no conclusive cause was ever determined. The official report hinted at an anomaly, and some suggested it was perhaps a complex electronic malfunction, though such a diagnosis failed to satisfy those who had witnessed the events. Years later, Salas would go on to testify to the incident, providing accounts at the National Press Club and before various committees, determined to bring what he viewed as an unexplained and highly significant event to public attention. His testimony, alongside similar cases of UFO sightings near nuclear facilities worldwide, has fueled ongoing speculation. Why would an unidentified craft target nuclear capabilities? What technology could remotely disable missile controls, and how did it evade detection? For many, the Malmstrom incident remains one of the most compelling accounts of UFO encounters involving military installations. It raised questions not only about what was in the sky that night, but about the very security of nuclear weapons in the face of phenomena that humanity still struggles to understand. The Brosno Dragon. The legends surrounding Lake Brosno in western Russia have persisted for centuries, but one story stands out among them, a tale that intertwines Russian soldiers, an advancing army, and an alleged dragon. This remarkable incident is believed to have occurred hundreds of years ago, though the creature's sightings have reportedly continued through both world wars and well into modern times. According to local accounts, a large force of Tatar warriors, on their way to invade Novgorod, camped on the banks of Lake Brosno to rest. They made camp, settled down for the night, and tied their horses along the shoreline. But as dawn approached, something began to stir in the depths of the lake. Witnesses described a massive creature, serpentine in appearance, rising from the water. It was large enough to strike terror in the hearts of the seasoned soldiers, its form a shadow against the fog, rising and coiling like a serpent or a giant reptilian beast. The dragon, as it came to be called, allegedly lunged from the water with a force that shook the ground. Warriors reported seeing the creature swallow both men and horses whole, its jaws powerful enough to crush the warrior's armor and weapons with ease. Some accounts describe the beast as having scales that shimmered like metal in the light, resembling what could only be imagined as an ancient, primeval creature. The soldiers, already disoriented by the shock of the creature's attack, chose to flee rather than face it, abandoning their plans to invade Novgorod. Though these events have not been officially documented, the stories persisted, woven into the folklore of the region. The Brosno Dragon became a local legend, drawing comparisons to other lake monsters, such as Scotland's Loch Ness Monster. Over the years, sightings of an enormous creature in Lake Brosno have continued, particularly during the 20th century, when soldiers and civilians alike reported seeing something large and unidentifiable disturbing the water's surface. In 2002, a Russian research team, spurred by persistent rumors and local law, decided to investigate Lake Brosno. Using sonar equipment, the team scanned the depths, hoping to capture evidence of what lay beneath. The results were inconclusive, though at one point sonar picked up an unidentified mass on the lake bed that briefly rose toward the surface before disappearing. Scientists have speculated that these sightings might be explained by natural gas eruptions, which can cause bubbling and disturbances in the water. However, no conclusive evidence of such eruptions has been found in Lake Brosno, leaving the dragon's presence an open question. While skeptics argue that the creature may have been a sturgeon or other large fish, locals remain steadfast in their beliefs. For those who live around Lake Brosno, the dragon is not merely a story, it is a guardian of the lake, a powerful force that has influenced the fate of armies and held back invaders. The lake itself has become a symbol of mystery and intrigue, with visitors and cryptid enthusiasts journeying from afar, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Brosno Dragon and perhaps solve one of Russia's oldest and most enigmatic legends. The Congo Snake. In the dense and nearly impenetrable jungles of the Congo, a strange sighting in 1959 by a decorated Belgian pilot, Colonel Remy van Leerde, became one of the most widely recounted cryptid encounters of the 20th century. Known for his bravery and expertise as a Royal Air Force ace, Van Leerde was accustomed to combat and capable of handling high-stress situations, yet his flight over the Congo that day would bring him face to face with something that even his combat experience hadn't prepared him to confront: a massive, serpent-like creature that appeared to defy natural explanations. While flying a helicopter on a reconnaissance mission over the jungle, Van Leerde and his crew were surveying the green expanse below when he noticed something unusual. As he looked down, his attention was caught by a long, sinuous form moving along the forest floor. Quickly, he realized this was no ordinary snake. In Van Leerder's estimation, the creature was at least 50 feet in length, its dark green scales catching patches of sunlight as it moved. The snake's head was wide and triangular, and as Van Leerder later described, it raised part of its body up from the jungle floor, almost as though it were observing the helicopter above. Horrified, but mesmerized, Van Leerder circled the helicopter closer to take a better look, maintaining enough altitude to avoid a potential threat from below. The creature seemed undeterred by the helicopter's presence and continued its slow but deliberate movement, winding itself along the dense foliage below. He snapped a photograph which would later fuel widespread interest among cryptozoologists, though its grainy quality left much to be interpreted. Nevertheless, Van Leerder remained adamant in his description, asserting that the snake was unlike anything he had encountered before, possibly even capable of attacking a man or large prey. After returning from the mission, Van Leerder's account quickly spread, attracting interest from both military and scientific circles. His reputation as a reliable and level-headed pilot lent credibility to his claims. Yet scientific explanations remained elusive. Herpetologists familiar with the African region noted that, while large pythons are indeed native to the Congo, none reached the dimensions Van Leerder described. A snake of that size would require an enormous food supply, and it would be nearly impossible for such a massive creature to stay hidden for long, especially near populated areas. However, local legends bolstered Van Leerder's account. Indigenous tribes in the region had long spoken of giant serpents, describing creatures that could block rivers or even overturn small boats. Some speculate that these stories may be based on rare sightings of unusually large snakes, possibly surviving remnants of a now extinct prehistoric species. Meanwhile, other theories suggest that Van Leerder's encounter could be explained by optical illusions or exaggerations due to the altitude and speed of the aircraft. Despite extensive research efforts and occasional reports of similar sightings, no definitive evidence of a 50-foot snake has surfaced. Nevertheless, Van Leerder's story remains one of the most compelling modern cryptid encounters. To this day, explorers and cryptozoologists occasionally venture into the depths of the Congo, hoping to glimpse the legendary giant snake and to confirm or debunk one of the most enduring mysteries of the African jungle. The Jebba Fofi. In the dense jungles of the Congo, there exists a story that has haunted explorers and local tribes alike for generations. A story of spiders so enormous they could rival the size of small animals. Known to the indigenous Baka tribe as the Jebba Fofi, which translates roughly to giant spider, these creatures have been described as reaching leg spans of up to 5 feet across, with bodies that resemble tarantulas, only much larger. For those who have ventured into the heart of the Congolese jungle, encounters with the Jebba Fofi are rare but terrifying, often recounting eerie tales that challenge conventional beliefs about the animal kingdom. The stories first reached Western audiences in the early 20th century when explorers returning from the Congo brought back descriptions of massive webs strung between trees. These webs, they claimed, were strong enough to ensnare birds and small animals, which the spiders would then ambush and paralyze with venomous bites. According to accounts by local tribespeople, the Jebba Fofi are not only real but a known threat, especially during certain times of the year when they are believed to be particularly active in hunting or protecting their egg sacs. Eyewitness reports are few but consistent, often describing similar features: a large, hairy body with a tan or brown coloration that helps the spiders blend into the forest floor. Their hunting strategy is allegedly ambush-based. They remain concealed under thick foliage or in underground burrows before leaping onto unsuspecting prey. Those who have witnessed Jebba Fofi in action describe a creature with a fearsome speed and agility that belies its size, an apex predator of its environment, unmatched by smaller animals in the immediate area. One of the most well-known accounts comes from the 1930s, when a missionary couple reportedly encountered a giant spider while traveling by foot through a remote region. The creature was initially mistaken for an animal resting on the trail, but as they approached, they recognized the arachnid features. Horrified, they described how it raised its legs defensively before quickly retreating into the dense jungle. The story circulated among colonial officers and locals, though little photographic or physical evidence ever surfaced. Skeptics argue that reports of the Jebba Fofi may be based on misidentified animals, particularly large bird-eating spiders, which are known to inhabit the region. Others suggest that the stories could be exaggerated due to the fear and mythos surrounding spiders in many cultures. However, cryptozoologists point out that the spider's reputed size and behavior align with known fossil records of ancient spiders and prehistoric arthropods, which were significantly larger than modern species. While no concrete evidence has been obtained to confirm the existence of Jabbar Fofi, the tale remains pervasive among the Baka tribe, whose members claim to know where the spiders can be found and advise visitors to avoid those areas. For those who have dared to explore these regions, the possibility of a giant predatory spider lurking in the underbrush is both a fascinating and unsettling prospect, a reminder that the wilderness may still hold secrets from an ancient past. The Rake Encounter. In a secluded stretch of North American woodland, a team of US soldiers stationed in a remote outpost for winter training exercises encountered something so otherworldly that it would leave them questioning their own senses. Their mission was to familiarize themselves with survival techniques in an extreme climate, and after several weeks, they were well adjusted to the harshness of the terrain. But one night, they would come face to face with something inexplicable, a creature that matched the description of a mythical figure often whispered about in internet forums and among supernatural enthusiasts, the Rake. The incident began with a series of strange noises echoing from the surrounding forest. The soldiers, trained to differentiate between the sounds of local wildlife, quickly noticed that this was unlike anything they had heard before. The sounds were faint at first, almost a scratching or low moaning, and they seemed to grow louder as the night wore on. Some members of the team brushed it off as a distant animal, while others felt an instinctual unease that kept them alert. It wasn't until one soldier on sentry duty reported seeing movement in the trees that their attention sharpened. The figure that emerged from the shadows was initially mistaken for a malnourished animal, perhaps a coyote or even a large bird. But as the figure crept closer, they could see that it was bipedal, moving on two legs in an awkward, almost shuffling gait. What struck them most, however, was its appearance, an emaciated, pale creature with long, thin limbs and sharp, bony fingers that ended in claw-like nails. Its face, devoid of any human warmth or animal instinct, was hollow and stretched, with eyes that seemed far too large for its skull, reflecting the moonlight in an unnatural, eerie glow. The soldiers trained their rifles on the creature, but none of them could bring themselves to fire. The Rake, as it would later be called, appeared to assess them, tilting its head in an unnervingly human gesture. For a moment, it held their gaze, as if it were weighing some unknown decision. Then, with a jerky, unnatural speed, it vanished back into the shadows, leaving no trace but a lingering sense of dread. Afterward, the soldiers searched the area but found no footprints or other signs of the creature's presence. They were left grappling with what they had seen, unable to rationalize it as any known animal or even a misidentified figure in the dark. Over the following days, their nights were restless, each creak of the trees or rustle in the bushes stoking a primal fear. Some of the soldiers would later seek out information on what they had seen, coming across descriptions of the Rake, a creature purportedly sighted across North America with disturbingly similar features. While many believe the Rake to be a modern myth, created and propagated through online horror communities, these soldiers remain convinced of their encounter. For them, the Rake was not a story, but a tangible, horrifying experience that defied reason and left an imprint as vivid as the training they had undertaken. Wendigo Sightings. In the biting cold of the Canadian wilderness, US and Canadian military personnel conducting winter exercises occasionally reported encounters with a creature that defied explanation. Known in Native American folklore as the Wendigo, this entity is said to be an emaciated, cannibalistic being with an insatiable hunger for human flesh. Stories of the Wendigo have haunted the northern Algonquin tribes for centuries, with descriptions portraying it as a supernatural creature born of cold, hunger, and isolation. But these soldiers were no strangers to harsh conditions, and they found themselves facing what they later described as a horrifying encounter with something that appeared almost otherworldly. The reports from these winter exercises, often dismissed by superiors as hallucinations due to stress or extreme temperatures, began with an unsettling feeling among the soldiers that something was watching them. In one incident, a team stationed in a remote region of northern Canada for cold weather training heard a distant, bone-chilling scream echo across the frozen landscape. The sound was unlike any animal they had encountered and seemed to carry a distinct note of agony. As the nights grew colder, the soldiers reported seeing shadows moving at the edge of their encampments, dark figures that seemed to blend with the snowy landscape yet moved with an eerie fluidity. One night, as a soldier patrolled the perimeter, he spotted a figure partially hidden by the trees. At first, he assumed it was one of his own team members, but as he approached, he realized the figure was impossibly thin, its arms elongated and its frame bent at unnatural angles. The creature's face was sunken and skeletal, its eyes glinting in the moonlight with an almost feral intensity. It emitted a low, guttural growl, and the soldier felt a wave of primal fear wash over him. Without a second thought, he retreated to camp, and the creature, seemingly aware it had been seen, melted back into the forest. Over the course of the exercise, similar sightings occurred. Soldiers reported hearing whispers in the wind, voices that seemed to come from all directions and yet from no source at all. Some were convinced it was the Wendigo, a supernatural creature that Native American folklore claims once was human but transformed into a beast through acts of cannibalism and madness in desperate circumstances. According to tradition, the Wendigo is driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh, stalking the isolated and the desperate in the dead of winter. Psychologists who reviewed these accounts noted that extreme cold, isolation, and the psychological stress of survival training could induce hallucinations. However, for the soldiers who encountered the creature, the experience was unnervingly vivid and real. While skeptical officers dismissed their accounts, some trainers, familiar with native legends, advised their soldiers to avoid discussing the sightings, as the tales of the Wendigo are deeply embedded in cultural lore and are believed by some to attract the creature when spoken of too often. The Wendigo sightings remain a rare but chilling aspect of winter training stories among soldiers. For those who believe in the creature's existence, the encounters are not merely local legends but grim warnings against the forces lurking in the icy expanse of the northern wilderness. A creature that is always watching, waiting for those desperate enough to fall prey to its endless hunger. The Mojave Bigfoot. In the vast, arid expanse of California's Mojave Desert, soldiers stationed at a training base in the 1970s began to encounter something far from the usual wildlife found in the region. Known for its scorching temperatures, rugged terrain, and sparse vegetation, the Mojave Desert was considered an ideal environment for tactical drills, but it would soon become the backdrop for eerie encounters with a creature that soldiers described as a large, hairy, ape-like figure, reminiscent of the legendary Bigfoot. The first sighting came during a night patrol, when two soldiers reported a shadow moving quickly and silently across their line of vision. They initially assumed it was an animal, but as they trained their flashlights on it, they caught a glimpse of something more humanoid. Standing over 7 feet tall, covered in dark, matted fur, the figure moved with an unnatural fluidity, crossing rocky ground with ease and disappearing into the night. Though startled, the soldiers decided against reporting it, assuming it would be dismissed as a trick of the dark or their own exhaustion. However, as the days passed, more sightings followed. On several occasions, soldiers heard heavy footsteps around their campsites, accompanied by strange growls or grunts. These sounds, unlike those of coyotes or other known animals in the area, were deep and resonant, almost guttural. At one point, a soldier claimed to have spotted the creature at a closer range. He described a face that appeared almost human, with large, deep-set eyes that watched him intently before the creature retreated back into the desert. The sightings continued sporadically throughout the duration of their training exercises. While some dismissed them as figments of imagination or the result of fatigue, those who encountered the creature were left unsettled by the consistency of the descriptions. The soldiers' accounts matched closely with each other, detailing the same towering height, broad shoulders, and thick fur. The creature's movements were almost silent despite its size, suggesting an intelligence that set it apart from typical desert wildlife. In the following years, cryptozoologists and Bigfoot enthusiasts took an interest in these reports, suggesting that the desert, with its isolated canyons and cave systems, could indeed harbor such a creature. Some researchers propose that sightings in the Mojave might be linked to other Bigfoot encounters reported across the western United States, particularly in California's dense forests and mountainous regions. Skeptics, however, argued that the extreme conditions of the Mojave would make it nearly impossible for a large bipedal creature to survive undetected. Today, the Mojave Bigfoot remains one of the more unusual cryptid sightings associated with military personnel, particularly given the desert's inhospitable climate and lack of cover. For those soldiers, the experience became an unforgettable part of their service. While the military made no official statement about the encounters, local law and witness accounts continue to add to the mystique of a creature that, whether real or imagined, seemed to leave its mark on those who caught a fleeting glimpse of it. The Battle of Los Angeles. In the early hours of February 25, 1942, barely 3 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, residents of Los Angeles were abruptly awakened by the piercing sounds of air raid sirens. The city, still on high alert for Japanese attacks, quickly went into blackout mode as spotlights scanned the night sky. Anti-aircraft guns stationed around Los Angeles were readied, and tension gripped the city. It was around 2 a.m. when radar detected an unidentified object approaching the California coast, setting off a chain of events that would come to be known as the Battle of Los Angeles. At approximately 3:16 a.m., anti-aircraft artillery began firing into the sky. Witnesses reported seeing a large object hovering over the city, with searchlights fixated on it as shells exploded around it. For nearly an hour, the guns continued to fire, with over 1,400 rounds launched into the air. Local authorities ordered total silence as the sounds of heavy artillery echoed across Los Angeles, and citizens took cover in basements and under tables. The sky was filled with bursts of light and smoke, yet no wreckage or debris fell to the ground. Despite the bombardment, the unidentified object, or objects as some later claimed, remained seemingly unharmed. By morning, the object had disappeared and the firing ceased. Military officials scrambled to explain what had happened, but initial reports were inconclusive. Some speculated it was a Japanese aircraft, a notion that quickly gained traction given the wartime fears and coastal vulnerability. However, both Japanese and US records later confirmed that no Japanese planes were near Los Angeles that night. The Navy initially suggested the sighting was a false alarm, caused by nervous troops mistaking weather balloons or stray aircraft for enemy bombers. But as more witnesses came forward with descriptions of an unusual object, theories began to shift. Photographs from that night published in newspapers showed what appeared to be a large oval object illuminated by searchlights. Some reports claimed it moved slowly across the sky, while others suggested it hovered in place. Civilians and soldiers alike described an object resistant to heavy anti-aircraft fire, sparking speculation that it was something beyond conventional aircraft. Rumors soon circulated that the object was extraterrestrial, a UFO with technology advanced enough to withstand the bombardment and evade radar detection. The US military's official response, however, was that the incident was a case of war nerves exacerbated by recent attacks, asserting that weather phenomena and nervous artillerymen led to the misunderstanding. In later years, this explanation did little to satisfy those who believed they had witnessed something inexplicable. The event was filed away and quietly removed from official discourse, but it became a part of UFO lore and a staple for conspiracy theorists who believed that the government had covered up an encounter with extraterrestrial technology. Decades later, the Battle of Los Angeles remains one of the most famous unsolved aerial encounters in US history, with many historians, researchers, and UFO enthusiasts continuing to debate what truly flew over Los Angeles that night. Whether wartime paranoia, an experimental aircraft, or an extraterrestrial presence, the mysterious encounter over Los Angeles has left an indelible mark on American wartime history and on the mysteries that linger in the skies. Conclusion. As each of these stories demonstrates, the world is vast and filled with mysteries that science and military protocol cannot always account for. Whether the result of human imagination under stress or true encounters with forces beyond our understanding, these cases have endured in the memories of those who experienced them, challenging us to question the boundaries of the known world. Perhaps one day, further investigation and technology will provide answers. Until then, these stories remain powerful reminders of how much we have yet to uncover in our world. Thank you for spending time with us through Spookscope today. Feel free to share your knowledge and wisdom in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, my dear spooker, stay curious.